We look forward to your presentation.
Thank you so much for having us. We really are thrilled to be here and appreciate this opportunity to present on decriminalizing sex work. It's the first time it's happened.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
We also want to ask you to take action with us to tackle some core issues relating to the criminalization of sex work, such as gender, racial, trans based violence, women's economic insecurity, and other issues. The first slide, we have a few slides that we brought to give a more idea behind our presentation. The first slide is about the project that we've been running with the help of the Department on the Status of Women since 1998. And the point of it is really to bring to the public's attention, to bring public awareness about violence against sex workers, really focusing on violence against sex workers, because when it's in the public arena and the public is aware of it, we feel that violent attackers are much less likely to slip through the cracks. Because violent men often start with sex workers and then get away with it, and then they go on to attack other women. And we campaign for all women's safety, because when sex workers aren't safe, no woman is safe. Any woman can be called a whore or a slut and themselves face violence and abuse. So, that's our motto. When sex workers aren't safe, no woman is safe. And the U.S. Prostitutes Collective, which I'm also part of, is a sex workers collective founded in 1982, and we've been campaigning since then for decriminalization of sex work, for safety, and for resources so that no woman is forced into sex work because of violence or poverty. Okay, next slide, please. This is about what we believe criminalization makes women more vulnerable to violence. I mean, criminalization pushes sex work underground, so it's more hidden, and creates a climate where women are easy prey to violent attackers, and often violent men include serial murderers. It causes discrimination and a lot of bias against sex workers. Sex workers face high levels of rape and other violence, but it's criminalization of sex work that makes this worse. And we've seen recently with the police crackdowns, like in the Mission going on right now, that's not, the focus of those crackdowns is not women's safety. And so what often happens when the women are trying to run from the police, and there's an atmosphere of fear, women are driven into more isolated areas, often unlit areas that are industrial areas, and it makes it much less safe. So we don't believe that crackdowns are the way to go about issues of more sex workers on the streets. That's really an issue of poverty that we'll deal with in a minute.
So I'm with Women of Color in the Global Women's Strike, and we are strong supporters of the U.S. Prostitutes Collective. And what I'd like to add on this point is that criminalization grants the police enormous power to enforce policies that we know are racist, sexist, and transphobic. Here in San Francisco, the Black population is 5.2%, but 66% of women arrested for prostitution are Black women. Criminalization opens the door to police illegality and abuses of power. Who do you report violence to that's committed by the police? So we've been supporting the Black Coalition Fighting Back Serial Murders of over 200 Black women in Los Angeles over a 25-year period. And it was revealed that the deaths of Black women, some of whom were sex workers, were being classified by the police as NHI, no humans involved, revealing the disdain and lack of respect, basic human respect, for the lives of Black women. It frees them of responsibility to investigate these crimes, leaving their families, our families and community in the lurch. It also happened that a 59-year-old black woman in Richmond was murdered. And the community members who were expressing their concern to the police response was, well, she knew better than to be out there. As if, again, her humanity was really not valued at all. And the recognition that it would be poverty that would drive a person to take that kind of extreme measure and risk, and not just a lack of awareness or concern or immorality.
On the other hand, the decriminalization of sex work would really make a huge difference because women would be allowed and able to work together for safety. You know, right now there's laws against working together. You could be criminalized for just, you know, having safe working in the same house together. And so that, you know, it would make a huge difference. Women would be able to report rape and violence to the police, because right now, if you're under the police crackdown and you're running from the police, you're not going to go and report any violence against you. So decriminalization would make a big impact on that. It would mean police resources would be released, so there'd be more police time. Instead of looking on the internet and trying to find out where the sex workers work, they'd be actually going after, you know, violent crime. And sex workers would be considered as workers, like other workers, would be able to get the same kind of resources and access to benefits. So it really, you know, would make a huge difference and would enhance health and safety, improve safety.
Decriminalization of sex work takes the laws off the books. It ends criminalization. Decrim is not legalization. Legalization reorganizes who is criminalized and what for. So it leaves these laws on the books. It leaves in place all the racist and transphobic and policies that disproportionately impact poor people and people of color, non-binary, trans folks. So we are calling for decriminalization because it means that sex workers can work together, they can organize for better working conditions. It changes the terms of their presence in our community. It recognizes them as human beings who have a right to make a living.
And it also ends criminal records, which, you know, just have a devastating effect on women's lives. You can lose custody of your children. You can face harassment. You can't get out of sex work because you can't get other jobs if you want to get that criminal record. So the next is the Nordic model, which is, I'm sure you've heard about. You know, there's different legal approaches to sex work. There's the Nordic model, there's legalization that Nell mentioned, and then there's decriminalization. And that is different to legalization, that's different to the Nordic model. The Nordic model is where selling sex is not illegal. It's like in some European countries have this model. You know, women are supposedly still can sell sex and they're not criminals, but a whole lot of other activities associated with prostitution are criminalized. So that, like, if a woman wants to hire security or hire a driver, that's still criminalized under the Nordic model. Or if a landlord rents to a sex worker, that's also illegal. And landlords, you know, are under duress to evict women, because if they don't evict a woman and they find out that a woman is working out of their apartment, then the police go after them with a criminal case. And so it makes it hard for sex workers to rent places in this kind of model, and it's more women can get evicted. So it's really, you know, with women we've talked to that work under those in Sweden, Ireland, France, where there's that Nordic model operating, it really, you know, doesn't help. Women are still harassed by the police, they can still lose custody of their children, and if as immigrants they can still be deported. So it's really not the kind of model that, you know, the sex worker rights movement wants, you know, in place. And then Nell's going to deal with legalization. Okay. Yeah, oh, you did legalization. Okay, yeah, we've already done that. So then, the New Zealand, for us, is really the model, and for the sex worker movement internationally, this is what we look to as the model. They decriminalized prostitution 20 years ago. They took the laws off the books. And everybody said, oh no, trafficking is going to increase, all the sex workers are going to come to New Zealand. But none of that happened. It was, in fact, sex workers now in New Zealand are treated like anybody else. They're workers, they can claim benefits. During the COVID crisis, they claimed benefits like any other worker, and they got the same benefits. Whereas in the US during the COVID crisis, in the package, that what was it called, the bailout money, they had a specific clause in the bailout money that said if you are somebody of a prurient sexual nature, if they judged you as having prurient, I didn't know what that word meant, I looked it up in the dictionary, and it's lewd, lustful, deviant. I mean, they're still using that kind of language in the US, and that was used to deny women access to that bailout money. So sex workers, suffered terribly during the coronavirus, weren't able to make any money and get any benefits from the government. But in New Zealand, they could. And government did a report after 5 years, no increase in prostitution, no increase in trafficking. Sex workers can report rape to the police, and the relationship between the police and sex workers has completely transformed. The police in the beginning were kind of nervous and didn't want it, but now women can go to the police will accompany them, they'll go to court, women can go to tribunals if there's exploitation going on, say in a brothel, and make a complaint. The complaints get heard, and they often win the complaints. So I mean, it's just a completely different situation, and that's the violence has gone down, and it's just treated like another course of work. Okay, these are some of the achievements of the sex worker rights movement over the years. We've been campaigning for years, and I just want to mention a couple of them. The first was, you've probably heard of, there was a task force in San Francisco in 1994 to 96. It was set up by the Board of Supervisors, and I was on it, and a number of us were on it, and we were tasked with the job of looking at sex work and coming up with proposals to the city. And we spent 2 years discussing, debating, bringing people in from other countries. I mean, it was an amazing time. The country was really looking at San Francisco as the city, where sex worker groups were included in the task force, because there had been task force in the rest of the country, but it was only law enforcement and police. And this was the first time that sex workers groups were included. And it was just an amazing 2 years of consultation with the community, finding out what the public thought, what we had sex workers testifying. And in the end, we agreed that decriminalization was the best thing, and that instead of spending, at that time it was $8.6 million, 7.6, now it's way more, on criminalizing people, jail, all of that money should be directed into resources and services for young people, for sex workers, families, etc. The other thing I wanted to highlight was that picture was taken after a year-long campaign we did, when a young woman came to us who had been brutally beaten and raped, and she had gone to apply for compensation for rape at the Victim Compensation Program, and told, sorry, you don't qualify, because the rape happened when you were working as a prostitute. It actually had a specific clause, and we thought that's not fair, that's discriminatory. And so we started a campaign, and we did like a California campaign and reached out to the public, to organizations, and we really got a lot of support. It was fantastic. Like veterans associations agreed that women shouldn't be discriminated in that way. And so that was the meeting when we went to the board, and they were going to vote on it, whether to support it or not. And they voted, get rid of it. And one of the women on the board said she thought the resolution was repugnant. I mean, the clause was repugnant. and she didn't understand how it could ever have been there. So, you know, it was a real victory because we were all there, the press was there, and we won it. You know, we got rid of it, and it was really an exciting moment in the movement. The other thing I just wanted to highlight was, I'm sure you know that 2022 last year, the repeal of the California loitering law, which was repealed on the basis that it was discriminatory, you know, racist, sexist, and transphobic enforcement. Even Governor Newsom said that when he signed the bill, so it's widely recognized that bill had to go. Yeah, so the next slide is decriminalization must go hand in hand with public policy that Bill's going to do.
And then get rid of the last point. So decriminalization, consider it, given that the cost of living in San Francisco is 94% higher and rent is 238% higher than the national average. Here in San Francisco, one of the richest counties in the country, a living wage for a mother with one child is $53 an hour. 51% of our population here in California live with little or no wealth or income, and 4 out of 5 poor people are women and children. Approximately 70% of sex workers are mothers, mostly single mothers, trying to feed themselves and their children. Decrim increases the possibility of finding real alternatives to prostitution. It reduces barriers that criminalization raises. Barriers to economic security, including jobs, housing, and educational opportunities. And it reduces the threat of women losing custody of their children, being deported, losing their housing due to a prostitution arrest. Another impact of racist, transphobic, and sexist enforcement is that children of trans and women of color sex workers are at great risk of removal from their families for what amounts to poverty and not neglect. And so then you have these young people who land in foster care, which has been labeled a pipeline to prison. So Decrim keeps women out of jail, it keeps their kids out of foster care, which keeps their kids out of prison, right? And so we feel like it's a win-win for San Francisco.
Next slide. We'll go quickly. I don't know how long we've been.
So before you do that one, you were going to talk about the Caring project.
Oh, sorry about that. No, that's important. To address women's poverty, the In Defense of Foster Women's Safety Project is proposing a guaranteed care income pilot for single mothers who are or have been at risk of criminalization and or losing their children to child welfare. So we're excited about that. That's something we're talking with the Department on the Status of Women about. So who in the US supports decriminalization? The support is growing. There really is. There's laws to decriminalize prostitution. New York, New Hampshire, Maine, Massachusetts, Washington, D.C. had a huge debate about it. Unfortunately, it didn't go through, but they had very big support from all communities. The Black community really came out big in D.C. to support decriminalization. New York Senate bill, right now there's a bill calling for decriminalization of sex work. New York, California, and Seattle have decriminalized loitering for the purpose of prostitution, as we said, because of racist and transphobic enforcement. ACLU did a really good report on decrim quite recently. And then data, that's supposed to be data for progress, said the majority of voters, particularly young voters, support decriminalization of sex work.
Okay, so in terms of international support, there's growing support there as well, and these are just a few of the many international agencies and organizations supporting Decrim, with the World Health Organization, the prestigious British medical journal, The Lancet, Amnesty International, Open Society Foundation, UNAIDS, the U.S. Human Rights Watch, and Global Alliance Against Traffic.
Just a few of them, there's more. And then the last slide is a picture of an event we hosted, our sister group, the Empower Foundation in Thailand. They're an organization of sex workers that have hundreds of women in their organization. And they really have, a lot of impact in the country. And they were on a speaking tour, and we went around the country with them. They went to the UN in New York, and then they went to Rhode Island, to Brown University to present. And then they came to the Bay Area, and we hosted them and had an event. And it was a lovely time. And they have been working to end criminalization for 37 years. And right now, they're drafting a new law to decriminalize sex work in Thailand, and it's really looking like it may go through. And it's entitled The Act for the Protection of People Who Provide Sexual Services. And that picture is also with our sister group, the English Collective of Prostitutes. And that's the end of our presentation. We just wanted to say that we're asking, we have come to the Commission, after presenting on why we want decriminalization, to ask the support from the Commission on the Status of Women for decriminalization, because we feel like San Francisco, would be the first, likely. We're not sure if other commissions have supported decriminalization, we haven't heard of it, but we think this would be the first. And San Francisco sets the trend. San Francisco is often the leader, and if you all did it, we feel like others would take the lead, like often happens when somebody does it, others take the lead. So we came to ask your support for the decriminalization of sex work.